everybody. I think that the Twitch stream is up. Looks good to me. Hope you all are doing okay. Staying sane and finding good ways to spend your time during this pandemic crisis. It can be scary, and I actually find a lot of comfort in reading scary books and scary stories, things about monsters, in this case a basilisk, and some giant spiders, all kinds of good stuff here. Of course, we're talking about Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. This month we'll focus on J.K. Rowling. Today, the sequel to the first Harry Potter, and then next time more about the series from there. I won't get into too many specifics, although I assume that most of you have probably read Harry Potter, and if you've read one of them, you've probably gone on and read all the rest too. They are a phenomenon. In my lifetime, there's not been a more popular author. I don't know if there's ever been a more popular author, just in terms of the numbers of how many people know about, how many people have read Harry Potter. A little bit of the background before we look at the sequel. I thought this was really interesting. I had heard these rumors, and so I went and searched for something that looked pretty real, I guess. This comes from her publisher, so I guess they should know. They say J.K. Rowling first had the idea for Harry Potter while delayed on a train traveling from Manchester to London King's Cross in 1990. That's a while ago. So I was 4 or 5 that year, I think. Over the next 5 years, she began to plan out the 7 books of the series. She wrote mostly in longhand and amassed a mountain of notes, many of which were on scraps of paper. So the sort of stories behind where stories come from is a topic I'm really interested in as a person who has tried writing stories, and as a person who loves reading stories. This idea that comes to her, delayed on a train. Well, maybe it's not ideal to have your trip delayed, right? Maybe you've been in a situation like that. You've been stuck in traffic, or you have to wait for a doctor's appointment or the dentist or something like that, right? Delays are really boring, but what if during that time you got an idea? And it sounds like it was even maybe partly inspired by the delay, right? Because trains, and specifically King's Cross Station, are pretty important in the Harry Potter story. It's the cover of the first book. We'll look at it in a second. In the UK edition, anyway, is the Hogwarts Express. And so out of that boring, dull, bad situation, something really remarkable came to J.K. Rowling, right? She didn't go off of just this one idea, though. And this is the other side of this that I think is important. She spent 5 years planning and writing and putting together a mountain of notes. I can't tell you how many, scraps of paper and old spiral notebooks I've got, stacked in boxes around here, with all the ideas for stories that I've, in some cases, written and in most cases never written, right? They really pile up. And she didn't just do that, but she had a book finished. So she arrived in Edinburgh in 1993 with 3 chapters of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone in her suitcase. By now she had a baby daughter, Jessica, but she continued to write in every spare moment she could find. When Joan had finished the manuscript, she sent the first 3 chapters to a number of literary agents, one of whom wrote back asking to see the rest of it. She says that it was the best letter I had ever received in my life. Does that sound familiar too? Right? Harry Potter getting the letter from Hogwarts that sets him on his new adventure, out of his dull, dreary life. Um, could it be that she was imagining, the possibility of getting her book published even as she was writing it over those years? I feel like she must have had some hope. So it's not impossible. Again, this is just like the smallest glimpse at where this book came from, but it's very instructive. I think you can learn a lot from these short descriptions here. The dedication, the kind of utter, uh, uh, taking every spare moment, right? The devotion to her craft that represents, even while being a new parent and whatever else she had going on, right? She took all the time she could to write, and it paid off, right? All the hard work, all the effort, sending it to a number of agents, right? Because you can't go straight to a publisher these days. You got to go through an agent, which has a kind of a cool secret agent kind of ring to it. Anyway, all this to get finally published, and then from there, of course, this phenomenal success. But maybe you notice there that the original title, of course, is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, which gets changed in the American edition to the Sorcerer's Stone. And that's, the movie is called that too. And so that's the name that I first saw the book. That's the name that most people probably know this by. So it's kind of interesting to think about what's going on with this change. The Philosopher's Stone. And the original cover with the Hogwarts Express, this huge scarlet steam engine, rather different from the American edition, which opts to show you a bunch of sort of pieces of the story instead, right? The golden snitch and the broomstick, the unicorn, and Fluffy, the three-headed dog, right? Instead, the British edition focuses on this one image. Platform 9 3/4, the Hogwarts Express, and Harry, of course, the main character. But not to get sidetracked too much on the covers. I guess we could go off on that for a while. But the Philosopher's Stone. So what the Philosopher's Stone refers to is the same thing as the Sorcerer's Stone, right? An object, legendary, mythical, that an alchemist or a magician can use to create gold out of any metal, that he can use to create an elixir of life so they effectively never die. This has a long history to it. So I know that kind of one of the themes of what we've been looking at with these books, all the way from Tolkien to Lewis and Langle, now Rowling, where do they get their ideas, right? In some cases, it's a bit mysterious. Sitting on a train that's delayed, and this picture comes to her, right, of this kid, this wizard. On the other hand, you can trace a lot of their ideas, right? It comes from things that they've read, things they've experienced, and things that are sort of out there in the world, in the world of ideas, or the real world. In this case, the Philosopher's Stone, it's hard to find a book that actually will tell you much about this thing. As far as direct teaching or direct description. Instead, it's all sort of vague, and you get lots of references to it. It's very mysterious what sort of a thing this stone of philosophers, the lapis in Latin, what is it, right? Now, J.K. Rowling, has a pretty strong literary and classical education that helps her out with this. And so she must have run across this idea somewhere along her studies. The idea that you could do something chemical or perhaps philosophical, right? This idea of thinking a problem through to the point that you can solve it, using your mind, using magic, right? What now we would probably just call science or possibly philosophy, right? Um, there is a really, really long history to these ideas. Um, there is possibly a kind of secret society. Um, the Inklings, right? These writers who got together and shared their work, um, they weren't like a secret society, but they definitely had a kind of a groupiness to them, right? They were friends and they shared things with each other that they might not share with just anybody, right? And so there's kind of a similar idea, I think, with the Philosopher's Stone, that the true teachings of the philosophers, the alchemists, are not for just anybody, right? If they write it down in a book, they're gonna be kind of secretive about it, but they give the experimental knowledge or the secret knowledge only to the people that they talk to in their little laboratory or up in their tower or something like that, right? So this idea of like a secret world that knows a truth, how to make gold, how to live forever, that they can't maybe, right, share with just anybody. It wouldn't be safe. It wouldn't make sense. I don't know. They might be in danger. Who knows? That sounds pretty familiar too, right? Because that's like the wizarding world, the world of magic. It exists in these books, and yet it's sort of hidden, it's secret from the real world. And Harry Potter, for the first 8-9 years of his life, knows nothing about it. So it's a great day in his life when he finally hears about it. And I don't know if I can't, again, point to you a specific book that you should necessarily go and read about if you're interested in the Philosopher's Stone. But there are some really interesting essays and studies, interpretations of the science and the philosophy or the psychology of this idea that are out there. There's lots. So if you go searching, you'll definitely find some interesting stuff. So that's all I'll say about that for now. Let's get to the Chamber of Secrets, because from here on out, all the Harry Potter books, although they continue having interesting different covers, at least have the same titles in the UK, which to me in America feels sort of like the wizarding world, like the secret world of magic over there. This one is the Chamber of Secrets, the first sequel, the direct sequel, Harry Potter's second year at Hogwarts. We now have some more characters introduced, his good friends Ron and Hermione, right, and his nemesis Draco Malfoy, of course his great hero Dumbledore, and so on, all the teachers. So we kind of have this background. We're like part of this secret world now, and so we're ready to go and revisit it for another adventure in the second book. I think that I read the first 3 books of Harry Potter sort of right in a row. I think that's how many had come out by the time I first read Harry Potter. So my memories of the first, second, and third book are probably the clearest out of all the rest of the series. And there's things that I like about each of the books in Harry Potter, but I somehow I really like the first 3 books a lot. I think the third is probably my favorite of all, I would say, personally, the Prisoner of Azkaban. But the first and the second, the Chamber of Secrets, I really, really enjoy. I think that they are the next best couple of books for me, right? If you had a different experience reading these, maybe if you read them all in a row together or something, you might have a less biased opinion than me. Again, my opinion, it might just come from having read those 3 first, because she hadn't written anymore by then. She was in the process of writing the 4th one, I think, if I remember right. And gosh, when that one came out, people were blown away because it was huge. The Prisoner of Azkaban got a little bit longer, but the Goblet of Fire was like twice as long as any of the other books. So Chamber of Secrets, it follows the first book pretty closely in terms of the general formula, if you want to say that way. The general outline or structure of the story is pretty similar to what you get in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Harry's bored at home. It's finally time to go to Hogwarts. We get to go to Hogwarts, have kind of an adventure on the way, right? So the British books show you, again, the way that he's getting there. In the second book is not on the train. He misses the train. You have to go in the car, the flying car instead. So it's just wonderful, wonderful stuff. And the American book, of course, again, focuses on sort of more of the secret elements of this world of magic and shows us the Phoenix. All right, so we'll talk about the Phoenix a bit and some serpents too while we're at it. And you can see the sword over here. So, sort of get an impression of maybe the conflict at the heart of the book. The writing is really cool. It looks kind of like it's written on the wall. And this is what we get written. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware. All right, so the writing is on the wall, if you like. Maybe you've heard that phrase. What does it mean? It's clear to everyone that something important is happening, but maybe it's not entirely clear exactly what that is. But we know it's scary, right? It's bad news, at least for enemies of the air. Maybe for his friends, it's okay. All right. So the writing on the wall, the Chamber of Secrets, we get that name here for the first time. We get the idea of an heir. An heir of what? We don't know yet. And this book definitely has a bit of a darker feel to it. I mean, there's plenty of scary stuff that happens in the first Harry Potter, but not like this. Not like writing that looks like it might be blood, right, on the wall of Hogwarts, of all places. Hogwarts is supposed to be safe, right? It's supposed to be secure. And so each book, and we'll talk about this more in a couple weeks, but you can see how J.K. Rowling, each time she goes back to this world, she kind of turns it up a little bit more and a little bit more. It gets darker, it gets scarier, it gets more intense each time that we have a new year of Harry Potter's story. So this is only the second one. It's not too scary, I hope. Like I said, at least for me, reading sort of scary books is actually kind of comforting. I don't really know why. Something about it just is soothing. Maybe because I already know that the story has a happy ending, so I'm not too scared. I'm not sure, but I don't want to, give away too much. If there is anybody out there who hasn't read this book, I'm going to try to discuss it without giving away too much of the ending, but it's a happy ending. I mean, there's 7 books, so Harry's going to make it. It's going to be okay because he's going to come back for 3rd and 4th and 5th, okay? Doesn't mean that scary things don't happen and sad things don't happen. And even the first book, right? It sort of contains in a small way all of the seeds of this idea that J.K. Rowling had that she develops over the rest of the series. So again, love the first 3 books, really love the 3rd one, but I'm not going to talk about it too much. I'm going to focus on the second one here. So let's get into this Chamber of Secrets a bit. We saw the Phoenix. All right. I want to just make sure that you guys have some time to write in any thoughts, and I want to make sure I'm not missing any thoughts if anybody has written anything. Just type them in the chat here on... Oh, gosh, did I do it again? Okay, it's silent. Okay, good. Just type them in the chat if you have any questions or thoughts about what we're talking about here at Harry Potter. But I just wanted to point out, again, just how brilliant J.K. Rowling is with her writing, and her ideas. They're they come from, I mean, we can call them creative, yeah, because she makes into something that is new, right? She's a kind of alchemist, taking things and turning them to gold. But they don't come from nowhere. Her material is historical, is literary, is her own experience perhaps, and things like sitting on a train, right? In this case, the phoenix, also a mythical, a legendary beast, very, very famous. Again, I don't know if there's a specific story to point to for this. It's just kind of there in a lot of literature. The idea of a bird that, well, it doesn't live forever exactly, right? But in some way, when it dies, when it turns to ashes in the fire, it is reborn. Either some versions of the story, it's the same bird that comes back to life over and over, right? Grows old, burns in fire, and is born young again, right? Becomes young again. Or in other versions of the story, maybe it's like the egg only hatches in a terrible fire, right? And so the newborn is coming out of the ashes in that way. So you can sort of take it more metaphorically or more literally, but the idea, I think, in most versions of the story is that there's only one phoenix at a time. The phoenix is rare. It's so rare, it's unique. It's literally the only one of its kind. And so that's, in some ways, a part of the meaning, anyway, of the image of the phoenix, right? The one true living thing of its kind. Again, like creativity, uniqueness is a word we kind of throw around, maybe not thinking about what it means too much, but at least in this case, it's really true. There's just one, right? The other idea, of course, this coming back to life, right? So coming back to life, not just through any means, but through something violent, something destructive, burning up, and yet not being destroyed, but instead coming back to life, becoming young again, being reborn, right? All of that sounds, again, kind of like what the alchemists are trying to do, right? They use a fire in their laboratory, in their forge. They put the metals in, and they hope to perfect, right? To make the metal into gold, or to get something that will make them live forever, this elixir, right? Or both. Maybe it's, again, sort of like two ways of talking about the same thing. The name of the phoenix in the Harry Potter world is Fawkes. So for Americans, we might not know this, but there's a holiday in the UK called Guy Fawkes Day. And if we do know about it, it's probably from that movie, V for Vendetta, right? Where they sing the little song, remember the 5th of November, the gunpowder, treason, and plot. Yeah, I think I stumbled on the words there a little bit, but it's something like that. All right, maybe if you're in the UK, you can correct me. But the gunpowder, treason, and plot of Guy Fawkes is a, again, historical event, something that, as somebody in the UK, J.K. Rowling would be pretty familiar with from growing up. And basically, I guess, it's celebrated sort of like the 4th of July is here, with fireworks, with people celebrating into the night, sort of feeling patriotic or something like that, I guess. Again, not speaking from personal experience here, but that's sort of what I get from looking at the stuff about this. The real story is pretty crazy. The little that I know, there's this guy named Guy Fawkes who is going to blow up the Houses of Parliament, right? So the government of the kingdom, he's just going to kill all of the lawmakers in one stroke, just wipe them out, destroy them. Fortunately for them, his plan doesn't go quite the way he hoped it would. nobody blows up. He's caught. He gets in a lot of trouble, right? And to the point that his name now stands for this holiday that brings everybody together. So that's a nice kind of ending for everyone else, not so much for him. But so, I don't know. I think there's a little bit of a joke there, but also some interesting history if you care to dig into it a little bit more, right? That this phoenix carries the name of a historical event that didn't really happen but gets remembered and brought to life every year, right? It's kind of interesting. I don't know. I could be off base with that. But of course, Fawkes, fire, fireworks, phoenix, kind of works together. It's kind of nice. So the other sort of clue that we get here has to do with something that we hear about in the first Harry Potter. It's one of the first things that lets Harry know that maybe he's not a totally ordinary kid, right? He is a parcel tongue. He can speak to snakes, and they can speak to him. He can understand what they say. So the name Slytherin makes you think of snakes, and we learn that the heir of Slytherin, the house of Slytherin, has this power of speaking to snakes that Harry Potter has, right? It's a very important sort of indication, right, that makes us think that maybe Harry is the heir of Slytherin. He's got some evidence that points that direction anyway. Now, we first hear about this actually through a class. So for all the time that we spend at Hogwarts, we don't necessarily spend that much time actually in classes learning magic. But in this case, we're in the most boring class of all, the history of magic with Professor Binns, who is a ghost. He is so boring of a teacher that he didn't even realize that he died. He just got up, his ghost got up and went to class and continued teaching as if nothing had happened. So it's kind of kind of hits close to home as a teacher because I worry, man, am I being like really boring? Does anybody even listen to what I say? Maybe I'm just going on, and I'm just kind of kidding. I don't worry about it that much, but it's kind of funny. Anyway, so they're in Professor Binns' class, and Hermione asks about the Chamber of Secrets, and he tries to brush her off, but she's Hermione, and she won't let go. She wants to know, please, sir, don't legends always have a basis in fact? Professor Binns was looking at her in such amazement. Harry was sure no student had ever interrupted him before, alive or dead. He starts to tell the story finally, because everyone in class is sort of like finally interested in what he's saying. And it winds up like this. Slytherin, according to the legend, sealed the Chamber of Secrets so that none would be able to open it until his own true heir arrived at the school. The heir alone would be able to unseal the Chamber of Secrets, unleash the horror within, and use it to purge the school of all who were unworthy to study magic. It's my best Professor Binns voice for you. He's making something super interesting sound super boring somehow. But if you think about what he's saying, to purge the school, that has a really terrifying meaning. Of all who were unworthy to study magic. So more than the first book, this second book brings in a kind of element of, let's call it, social justice, right? The idea that different people can be different and have their own unique qualities, but that somehow they can all come together and work and study and learn, in this case magic, as equals, right? Uh, that's the way that Hogwarts is supposed to work, right? Anybody who has the talent and wants to put in the work can go and study there, and will be treated fairly. On the other hand, what we learn from Professor Binns is at the start of the Hogwarts story, there was actually 4 different people, right? That are the names of the 4 houses are passed down, and this one in particular, Slytherin, had as sort of his own idea about things, that certain people, no matter how talented they were not worthy to study magic, with other people, no matter how little talent they actually might have, or how nice of people, or how ambitious, or how brave, right? These different kind of qualities. Intelligence is, of course, the Ravenclaw house, and for Slytherin, it's ambition, but also maybe something a little bit darker even. A kind of elitism, right? That thinking that they're better than everyone else just because they were born with a certain name or into a certain family or something like that, right? Those who have magical parents in this case. So, again, not to give away too much of what's going on here, but I think that as you're reading this, you can see how that lines up with some things that people experience in the real world. People experience feeling like they're just better than everybody else, or feeling like they're just not as good as everybody else for something that is not really in their control, whether it's looks or how you talk, right? The language you speak, your native tongue. All of these kind of things are things that we have to deal with. And so again, by reading a book, even one that takes kind of a darker look at things, I think it gives us some perspective for our own lives. Now, of course, Harry was very close to being put into the House of Slytherin, right? He could have done great things, the Sorting Hat said. But instead, he really made the choice, right? He wished so hard, he wanted so bad to be in Gryffindor with Ron and Hermione, that he was able to make that decision. The Sorting Hat agreed that he would fit in there. So that's kind of interesting, right? Like, maybe it sort of does depend on the choices you make, no matter what aspects of your character or how you look, you can't control. Maybe you can control what you do with it, right? So obviously Harry is not the kind of person who's going to unleash a horrible monster and use it to get rid of other people, right? And yet J.K. Rowling makes us doubt that. She's so good at telling the story, and we don't figure it out to the very end, right? So eventually, spoilers, Harry does face the monster, and the way that he's able to overcome it is partly because he has been, like a good student of magic, studying and figuring out, what is its weakness? How do I deal with this monster? Even if I can't face it directly yet, I want to know about it. I want to understand it, right? So this is, again, good advice. When there's something scary out there, do you go and try to learn more about how to deal with it, or do you just try to avoid it, right? It's kind of up to you. So if you're brave like Harry, you go and you learn, you read, right? So this comes from a book. Hermione has been helping them look up stuff about the Basilisk. Here they find it, finally. Of the many fearsome beasts and monsters that roam our land, there is none more curious or more deadly than the Basilisk, known also as the King of Serpents. This snake, which may reach gigantic size and live many hundreds of years, is born from a chicken's egg, hatched beneath a toad. Its methods of killing are most wondrous, for aside from its deadly and venomous fangs, the basilisk has a murderous stare, and all who are fixed with the beam of its eye shall suffer instant death. And it goes on. So here's the stare of a... I looked up the word basilisk, and this was a picture that I found. So I think that there's an animal that, at least in a nickname, has the title Basilisk, maybe because it has this kind of crown, right, looking thing on its head. Maybe just because it has a really creepy stare. Anyway, the idea that you can sort of shoot a beam out of your eye and affect people just by looking at them. Again, a really, really old idea in lots and lots of literature. Maybe not in any particular story, but in lots of stories and in lots of superstitions too. The superstition of the evil eye, right? That witches and magical people can affect you just by looking at you a certain way, and so you have to watch out, right? And there's the other side to this too, right? The idea that that you're able to sort of see into somebody's true self if you look into their eyes, right? That there's a kind of connection that is established when you see into somebody's eyes, and of course they're looking into your eyes at the same time, so it goes both ways, right? That's sort of like the positive spin on it, all right? That you can sort of communicate something just by looking, and I think it's really true, right? That certain teachers, maybe not Professor Binns, but probably Professor McGonagall, right? Just the way that they look can make the class fall silent, right? That force, for lack of that beam that shoots out of their eyes is that powerful. Maybe there's some truth to that, but in this case, of course, instant death. So taking it to a real extreme. And there's some other really interesting little tidbits here, right? That it comes out of a chicken's egg. Right? So again, it's sort of like the alter ego of the phoenix in a way. The phoenix that has this power of eternal life, effectively, right? That comes in fire. Instead, this cold-blooded thing, the serpent, that comes out of an egg, right? But hatched beneath a toad, right? The cold, slimy, very far from fire, and instead maybe poisonous, right? The powers of the phoenix involve giving life. The powers of the basilisk, the king of serpents, involve giving death. And so it's got a terrible, terrible curse in a way. It can never look at anything without killing it, right? So it's almost like a version of the Midas touch, right? Midas, the king who touches things and they turn to gold, right? He thinks it's good at first, finds out not so much. Well, in this case, it's clearly a problem, right? If you can never look into anybody's eyes without them turning to stone or dying, right? Like the Gorgon. Ultimately, in that myth, the Gorgon is shown her own reflection, right? And is turned to stone. So, again, lots and lots of sort of versions of this story out there. Now, the last little topic here that I wanted to talk about, it goes back to this idea of writing again. So let me take a little break here and check and make sure we're not leaving any comments out there. Oh, it's Justino. Justino says, "Hi, I love Harry Potter. Lol, nobody blows up. Harry's not an ordinary kid? ? Justino, he's no ordinary kid. At least in far as he's magical. Now, arguably, in many ways, he is pretty ordinary, right? He goes through a lot of the things that every kid goes through. So we can relate to him, which is really nice. But no, he's not just any kid, right? He's exceptional. He's the boy who lived, right? He has this kind of burden, in a way, of being special that we see him dealing with in all the books. So I'm sorry if I ruined that for you, Justino. If you're still listening, let me know if you have any other comments or questions. Thanks for laughing at my joke about nobody blowing up. That's helpful. The celebrations, though, they all put fireworks. They have big bonfires, right? So, yeah, hopefully nobody gets hurt in that. Um, Nobody actually blows up, right? Because we're not all like the Phoenix, right? Now, the idea of the writing, it comes back from the very first thing we talked about with J.K. Rowling, writing on little scraps of paper, right, as she got this idea. The writing, it comes up again in the writing on the wall. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. It's pretty threatening in that case, so not so good. But there's also these two other really important forms of writing that we see. So one of them comes at the very end, when we finally find out about the whole idea of the diary of Tom Riddle. All right, so sort of this secret diary that has been kind of a less important mystery, right? Kind of in the background throughout most of the book. We finally see that it is really important at the very end, right? Who Tom Riddle is and what his diary is able to do, right? So this is Tom Riddle actually talking towards the very end. It says, "She opened her heart and spilled all her secrets to an invisible stranger." All right, so not giving away who that is or what's going on there, but this idea, again, that there's something about writing and telling a story, making it open to the world, that is different from, putting your writing in your diary, which you think is going to be secret just for you, or just sharing it with a close friend maybe, right? It can be really nice to be able to tell your secret to somebody, or it can be really nice to write down your ideas so you don't forget them, or so you can think more about them and expand on them, develop them. But something different happens when that's out there in the world, right, for anybody to read, right? So the alchemists, the people who worked with the Philosopher's Stone, they never wrote down all their secrets, right? Or if they wrote in a way that was sort of mysterious that not everybody would be able to understand. And, the only person who can really betray you is somebody who knows all your secrets, right? So that idea of, being a snake, right? Being a traitor. It has to do with envy also, right? Wanting something that doesn't belong to you. But when we talk about a snake, often what we mean is somebody you can't trust, right? Somebody who will stab you in the back, right? So all of that is there in the diary side of things. And the other side of this that we get throughout the Chamber of Secrets is this new character who is just a brilliant creation, Gilderoy Lockhart. Right, there he is with his big smile, his shiny teeth, and his face on the book that he's holding for everyone to look at, of himself smiling with his shiny teeth. Right, it's just really, really fun. He's one of the first new characters we're introduced to, actually. And of course, he comes to school to teach defense against the dark arts, and has all kinds of misadventures, let's say. But he is the opposite, right? He puts all of his stories out there and talks really loud so everyone can hear him, right? And he wants to sort of be famous, basically, right? So the total opposite of the secret diary is this best-selling author with a great smile, right? Very handsome, very charismatic. Total opposite of Professor Binns, right? Nobody is able to be bored when Gilderoy Lockhart's in the room, right? It's the life of the party. Now, of course, he also has a secret, which we learn in the course of the book, right? And I think that with Gilderoy Lockhart, it strikes me that, maybe what we're seeing is a little bit of J.K. Rowling's sort of worries about what being a famous author might mean. But again, it's in this kind of playful way, just like with the Guy Fawkes, how she uses that as kind of a joke. Gilderoy Lockhart is ultimately kind of a joke, right? But there is something there about what could happen to you if you care too much about being famous, having everybody buying your books and, getting written up about in all the papers, right? So, again, this is something that makes him kind of a alter ego for Harry Potter, too, right? Because Harry Potter is very famous for something that he didn't really even mean to do, ultimately, right? Just because he lived, he is the most famous wizard in the world. And by the end of the first book, he's done a little bit more to maybe deserve some of his fame, right? He is very remarkable in many ways, as Dumbledore keeps, pointing out to him and trying to encourage him when he doubts himself. But there is always this sort of hint that maybe, the people who dislike Harry like to sort of make him see that he's famous, he's maybe getting some fame that he doesn't deserve, right? So that's just kind of an interesting element to these books that I think we can keep an eye on. It's not usually as obvious as with Lockhart, but again, we'll see it with Rita Skeeter. I think she comes out in the fourth book, right? Writing about Harry Potter in the paper, making him into this big, sort of larger-than-life figure. And I think that J.K. Rowling probably knows better than just about anybody, right, what that might feel like to have everybody, wanting to get your autograph, right, buy your books. And she has done a really incredible job of dealing with that pressure. I mean, I can't imagine, being such a celebrity and then continuing to write book after book that is just amazing, just great stuff, right? She's probably, again, the most famous author in the world at this point. Everybody knows about Harry Potter. And she continues to do great work. She's recently been focusing kind of on the films, right? And that's a topic that we will actually get into in the summer. So the way that we're kind of going along, J.K. Rowling is the fourth of the authors that you can look up on the Signum Academy website and find materials about them, right? So everything after this point is going to be totally new ground, right? So this summer, I do want to continue doing some kind of reading group that I hope you guys will participate in, either with your own local groups, if that's possible, right? Or just with your family and friends, maybe if you guys want to meet on Zoom or whatever and like talk about a book, awesome. Like I highly, highly recommend doing that. I'll have a book that we can read together, and we can set up some kind of plans for how much we'll read and how much we'll talk about each time. But the other thing that I wanted to do this summer was look more closely at the idea of fandom, right? The kind of fan communities that surround these books. And Harry Potter's is especially lively, I think, because, well, he's the most popular of all, and he's the most recent also, all right? He's the one that there's actually new stories coming out. Still, right? She's still working on this story. New movies coming out that are set in the wizarding world of Harry Potter. So even if they're not directly about him, they sort of give us more of a picture of what that world is like. And again, maybe you guys have even been like writing your own stories and stuff, your own fan fiction, or doing some other kind of creative activities with these characters and these books. That's awesome. That's the kind of stuff that I want to kind of turn to after the end of our Harry Potter discussions. So I'll have some more news about that next time before we go. So whenever you're watching this, I guess if it's the summer already, go check out the Signum Academy webpage and see what it is we're reading. If you guys are watching live or around this time, oh gosh, yeah, I forgot. It's May 4th, right? So speaking of famous fan communities and adaptations of stories, Star Wars, right? This is Star Wars Day, May the 4th, and all that. So happy Star Wars Day to you out there. I hope that you're reading Harry Potter or something like that, something just as good. If you are reading along, just know that in 2 weeks, so not this coming Monday, but the following one, we will be talking about the whole Harry Potter series. And again, I'm going to try to do my best not to spoil too much, just in case there's people out there who like hearing about this stuff but haven't read the books yet. I hope it inspires you to go and read the books as soon as you can. Now's a great time. J.K. Rowling has made her Harry Potter property, right? Her ideas are now open to everybody, right? So you are allowed to hear audio of this without infringing on the copyright or anything like that. So that's pretty cool. So you can look up some teachers and whatnot reading this book out loud for free. Your library definitely has a copy of this, I'm sure. If you want to look it up, either the audiobook or the e-copy, the e-text, the e-book, right? So you can read it that way. Obviously, the movies are great. Go check those out. And again, we'll talk about them another time. But for next time, I'm going to be talking about the whole Harry Potter series and how each book gets more complex, more intense, more scary, and there's like more at stake each time somehow. Harry has always got his life on the line, but somehow it feels more important every single book. And that's, again, just an amazing ability that J.K. Rowling has. So we'll look at how she does that. What are some of the skills, if you like writing and all that stuff, what are some things you can learn from J.K. Rowling's writing? So I hope this has been a fun and interesting intro to the old Harry Potter Chamber of Secrets. Got Condrav in the chat giving a thumbs up. I can't tell who that face is. I hope it's a good person giving me the thumbs up and giving Harry Potter the thumbs up. Maybe it's Gilderoy Lockhart. Who knows? Giving a smile. So thanks for you guys who joined me and for your comments in the chat box. Thanks for all you out there watching on your time. Always appreciate it. You can always send questions and comments anytime through our website, Signum Academy. If you find it through signumuniversity.org, you can send us emails, send us messages, and we'll join you again in a couple of weeks. All right. Till then, take care and happy reading.